I'm Dr. Helen Mackey. I'm a rehabilitation physician and I run a late effects of polio clinic at the Mount Wilgal Rehabilitation Hospital in Sydney. Poliomyelitis was a condition that affected thousands of people in Australia. Now we're seeing the polio survivors who are experiencing late effects of this condition. The important thing is with people coming with late effects of polio is that they've lived very successful lives. They've managed their condition throughout their lives and now they're entering a phase where they need some help. But that help needs to be under the management of the person themselves.
People who had polio as children felt they'd been abandoned. A lot of people have actually gone on to lead perfectly normal lives. They've gone to a regular school, they've gotten married, they've had kids, and all of a sudden they're in their, say, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they've got all these symptoms that mimic polio. It takes them right back to themselves as a 2-year-old or an 18-month-old thinking, I've been abandoned. The kicker is that then they can't actually get any answers from the medical health professionals because the medical health professionals are no longer in tune with what's going on in the world of polio.
I've lived with polio for 70 years. I contracted it at birth when a doctor attended a polio case and perhaps he should have washed his hands a bit better because he brought the polio with him.
About 30 years after my initial episode with polio, I was no longer able to lift my better leg into the car. I had to pick it up and manually move my leg into the car. I didn't know it was related to my polio, I didn't know what was happening.
I was having a few falls. I fell over on the vinyl flooring, so I decided that I had to start using a wheelchair, which I really fought against doing, because I thought once I get in the wheelchair, I'll never get out of it.
Now that we are ageing with a disability and coming to the point where we are willing to seek help, we just need people to understand.
We struggled so hard for our independence early on, and to actually stop being independent and going into a wheelchair and having to have people push you around can be pretty devastating.
I did seek help and nobody knew anything about post-polio or polio.
The minute someone comes in who's a polio survivor, they're so different to the next person that's going to come in who's a polio survivor. So I think the first thing for me is to start at a blank slate. I really examine from head to toe. I really take the time to get to know them, get to know their stories. You need to learn where they've come from. Fatigue management and exercise go hand in hand. And for some people, they're doing their daily activities and that's enough exercise. Allowing that client to know that that's actually enough is quite freeing for some people because they just feel like they're hitting that wall, trying to exercise, trying to do the right thing, and they just need to actually slow it down a little bit and really reconceptualise what is activity and exercise for them.
Becoming dependent upon equipment and aids can be really daunting for a lot of people. So taking in consideration of that attitude of their past experiences, a lot of people had heavy braces and calipers and things on as a child and don't want to go back to using that sort of equipment. So having an understanding of that, giving them choice, guidance and a lot of support through the process is really important. You're dealing with a new onset of weakness, but it's a different attitude to it, and it's about preserving their function into the future.
The message I try to get across as an orthotist is really that for whichever group of polio survivors we're talking about, things have moved on technically. Lots of polio survivors have a neutral or moderately negative view, in my experience, of bracing, particularly if they're quite extensive bracing. So emotionally, you can appreciate that people have a particular view of bracing. We'd hope to try and change that and improve that, make it a bit more of a positive experience.
Nobody else is working with polio survivors. They are, for all intents and purposes, the forgotten community. They're everywhere, they're all around you. They're your sister, they're your mother, they're your uncle. They are all over the community. As a matter of fact, we believe that there are up to 400,000 polio survivors living in Australia today. We consider ourselves to be the largest single physical disability group in Australia, and yet we receive no funding. There is a legacy that we need to leave. The very least that we want to be able to do is to have enough health professionals trained up into how to work properly and appropriately with the post-polio body without doing further damage, and so that they can work with their patients into the next 10, 20, 30 years.